Hey everybody, welcome to the Pixel Blips podcast for April 14th, 2013. I'm Andy Ryan, and excuse me, Princess. Joining me, he's a guardian. He came from the net to defend mainframe. Dave, Dave, what have you been playing this week?
Well, so Guacamelee came out on Tuesday, right?
I don't think that's how you say it.
Guacamelee?
I think it's Guacamelee.
Yes, well, either way. So I picked that up, I think, Thursday night. It was on sale on the PSN for, I think, $12. I think it's $15 normally. So it's pretty goofy and fun. You are, for those who may not know, you are a luchador. Well, you're an agave farmer, so you make tequila, who then is killed by the bad guy, and while you're in the netherworld, you find a magical luchador mask that allows you to traverse both the world of the living and the land of the dead. And it's pretty interesting that mechanic comes into play probably an hour and a half in. But it's a Castlevania type game, but
Super
you're playing
Metroid, Castlevania.
Yeah, it's a
Metroid. The portmanteau is
Metroidvania. Metroidvania. Kind of game, but you're playing a luchador, so all your moves are wrestling moves. You suplex bad guys, you pile drive bad guys. It's pretty fun. The combat's not super deep, but it's interesting enough. Once they introduce all the mechanics, it starts getting a little hectic.
Yeah,
but it's kind of fun. You can throw baddies into each other. There are baddies on the screen at the same time that are from the two different dimensions, so you kind of have to hop between them to kill all the guys on the screen.
Cool.
You can throw one guy in the direction of a guy in another dimension. If you switch dimensions, it'll hit him. If you don't, it won't hit him. And it's for the Vita and for the PS3. It's the same game, and it has the good cross-save functionality so that you upload your save to the cloud and then download it back to whatever the other system is. So if you're playing on the PS3, you want to take it on the road, you can do that.
Yeah. Well, that developer Juicebox.
They also did
Drinkbox or Juicebox?
It's Drinkbox.
Drinkbox. Sorry. 6 and 1/2 dozen of the other. Anyway, Drinkbox. Drinkbox?
Yes.
Okay, I'm
Drinkbox.
get that
Studios.
locked in so I don't mess it up. Their last game was very fun on the Vita. Mutant Blobs from Space.
Yeah, Tales from Space, Mutant Blobs Attack,
Yes.
or something like that. I played probably 20 minutes of that. I've put almost 3 hours into Guacamelee so far.
Go back and play more Mutant Blobs because the end of that
It gets
game
better?
the end of that game is amazing.
It gets better. Yeah.
I love it.
Okay, I might. I mean,
I'm gonna marry it.
I downloaded it so I can still access it from PlayStation Plus. And that Guacamelee is a really fun game. The art style is really nice. I love the music. Like I'm not a big mariachi fan. Like I'll listen to a little bit of it, but the music throughout this is
Are
horns.
there big mariachi fans?
Yes, there are actually.
Because I thought there were just people in Mexican restaurants that don't totally hate it.
You've never been to like a quinceañera or anything like that? Oh no, it's fun. There's some really good mariachis, and then there's some like guys who were trying really hard. But I mean, a lot of the music is horns and guitars, mariachi type music, especially when you're running through towns. It's not always like big over the top wrestling stuff, but it's a lot of fun. And there is a co-op. Like you can play, like your main guy's name is I want to say Juan, and then the second player, if you do co-op, is I think Tostada. So it's kind of fun. But it's a really interesting game. It's a good buy for $12 if you get it on sale from the PS.
I think it's normally 15.
It is 15, but the plus is 50.
But would you say it's worth the 15?
It depends on how many times you want to play it. I'm guessing it's not very long. I've looked at the leaderboards, and a lot of the leaderboards are, 100% clear, 3 hours. But they're speed runs, so there's like a guy on there who's beat the game in under an hour and a half. But he probably played through it like 4 or 5 times and is just hauling ass through it. He knows where all the stuff is. He knows where he needs to go. So, and there's a little bit of the whole, you kind of have to figure out.
So it's not like
what you're doing.
Like Super Metroid and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Speed runs of those, I would say, are probably not 3 hours. They're probably much longer.
If you're going to do 100%, yeah. If you were just going to haul ass through it and go straight to where you need to go, no exploration, nothing, then yeah, you could probably beat it in 3 hours. You could probably beat those. But it's a miniature game. Like
so would you say it's comparable? Because you're a big Symphony of the Night fan.
I love Symphony of the Night.
You know that map backwards and forwards.
And upside down, both ways.
Yes. Would you say it's comparable in size to the first castle, both castles, not even the first castle?
I want to say it's probably about 3/4 of the size of the first castle.
Okay, because
it's not super long, but there is a lot of stuff. Like you will wind up going back to areas because at some point you learn to turn yourself into a chicken in order to get. Yes, in order to get into smaller areas. So you'll go back into the town and there's like hidden areas in there and things like that. And a lot of the stuff, it like has the Legend of Zelda style heart system where you collect pieces of your heart, and then you get another one, or pieces of your energy, or whatever is what you use to do your super luchador moves, and you get another one after 3 pieces.
Okay. Because I know Outland, which is another Metroidvania game that came out recently, also felt not as big as either Super Metroid or
but I mean,
Super Metroid to me is, I mean, the
massive.
The map isn't huge, but Super Metroid to me is like the hallmark of
that
the world feels big.
It does feel big, and you know, there's a lot of areas you can explore. Like you can go into houses if the door's open. Like obviously, if the door's smashed, you can't go through it. But
a little bit like Zelda 2: Adventure of Link.
Very, very similar to that, yeah. But going through the world of the dead and the living, there's like platforms that are only available in one or the other. So you have to like jump, switch, land on the platform, and then jump again to make your way up through these vertical and horizontal puzzles. You have to switch through the land of the living and the dead a lot. But it is a lot of fun. The combat, like I said, is interesting. It gets a little tedious at some points where you have to switch back and forth between the 2 different worlds a lot in a single fight, but you get used to it after a while.
So that's cool.
It's a pretty neat game, so and I'm glad I paid, you know,
$12 bucks.
$12 for it. I think that might be a little much, but it is, you know, it's an indie title. It's not like a big PlayStation.
Yeah, this is a pub fund game. So for those of you who don't know, the pub fund works. Sony will front them so many sales.
Yeah.
Like they will front them the money for 10,000 sales, and then once they get to 10,001 sales, then Sony starts paying them. So it's basically Sony says, well, we'll front you 20,000, and if you make it, you get the icing on the top of the cake.
You start making money on top of that. But I mean, it's an interesting game, and I'm glad I paid for it. And it's I don't know. My wife actually liked it. Like she'll play it. So if I can get her to play co-op with me, that's bonus. Because then I can, in anything you can get your wife, girlfriend, whoever to play video games with you,
or your husband,
or what, you know, whatever, your significant other to play video games with you if they're not much of a gamer.
Remember, gamers aren't only guys.
Yeah, they're not all. Yeah, I made that comment. They're not all chubby guys.
Yeah. Well, that was before the cameras.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we'll go to me. Since we don't have anything else to talk about, nothing.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot going on, so we may
not a whole lot newsworthy this week. So I think we're just going to kind of flow. Not that I didn't mean to use that word. We're just going to see where this goes.
See how this goes in the next 15 to 20 minutes.
We're just going to hold our hands and see where this takes us.
Yes. Might be a bumpy ride.
Will probably definitely be a bumpy ride. I discovered Kyo's Flying Squadron for my Sega CD. Kyo's Flying Squadron is one of the last, probably not the last, but one of the last games to come out on the Sega CD. And it is so anime where, like, because remember, before the second, I would say the second half of the PlayStation era. So,
first PlayStation?
The second half of the first PlayStation era. So when you're getting into those 98s, 99s, when we were ramping up for
before the PS2 launch.
Yeah, right before the years before the PS2 launch. For the youngins in the audience, which I doubt there are many, anime games weren't as popular as they are now. No. Like now we get Naruto, Ninja Storms every year.
I mean, there was a few Dragon Ball Z
DBZ games every year. Well, the first DBZ games for the PlayStation, you had to buy import.
Yeah, but I mean, like, and there was like one or two of them that came out here that are super hard to find.
Yeah, so like 98, 99 was when that anime video game synergy really started to blow up.
Ramp up, yeah.
And then, of course, you know, now we're looking at, you know, Sakura Wars comes out here when it never would have come out here before. No. Things like Ni no Kuni come out here, would never have come out here before. So anyway, Kyo's Flying Squadron, which came out in 94, I think.
Sounds 94. About right.
Is years ahead of its time.
Really?
And it's funny because it's one of those Japanese type games that I like where it's, I always like to say, I like stuff that's unabashedly Japanese. I said
it's Japanese for the hell of being it.
Yeah, I said this on Twitter, that I like things that are unabashedly Japanese, like Hello Kitty, only if she's wearing a Street Fighter outfit, like that type of thing. Like, and Kyo's Flying Squadron, a lot like Legend of the Mystical Ninja or the Goemon series in Japan, is that type of game. It is a horizontal side-scrolling shooter.
See, that's exactly what I thought. I thought it was either a shmup or a horizontal shooter. As soon as you said the name, I'm like, that totally sounds like an R-type game.
The Kyo era in Japan is before the Meiji era, which is the last feudal era, I believe. Japanese history? Yes, sort of. Okay.
Anyway.
So the Kyo era, so it's set in this feudal Japan backdrop, but you're also a bunny girl riding a rocket, or I think it's a rocket. Yeah. And that summons little dragon options to fight with her, and at one point you're fighting this giant kabuki dancer who rises up out of the sea. It's very weird and very fun.
Well, it sounds...
And it has voiced anime cutscenes, which for the Sega CD at the time wasn't entirely common. It was,
there was a handful of games that had that stuff.
There was like Lunar and the Kyo's Flying Squadron, that ninja game.
The Dark Wizard intro and eggs.
Yeah, Dark Wizard had it. So the Sega CD games that we did get that had full motion video were things like Night Trap, which is awesome. Double Switch, which is not awesome. Sewer Shark, which is not awesome.
No, Sewer Shark was pretty bad.
That's so like looking back on the Sega CD's full motion video library. There's so many things that I'm like, like if CNC Music Factory, like if you had just gone just a little bit further with it, this would be so bad it's good. But at the moment, it's just
bad.
Yeah. So I was playing Kyo's and dust off my Sega CD and realized that for some reason in my video switcher, my Sega CD was sending bad information over its audio cable, so it would cause the whole Genesis signal to shake and shudder. So now I'm no longer on stereo until I figure out whether that's with my video switcher or whether it's with the ports of my Sega CD. It's probably not with the Sega CD, but
yeah.
But yeah, so I played Kyo, and that kind of brought back like a bunch of Sega CD, Sega Genesis memories for me.
Well, I mean, it's always
because especially it's this time of year. This time of year was when you first shared Phantasy Star 4 with me. This time of year was when I got started on Shining Force and Dark Wizard. Oh, and I picked up Shining Force because I had Sega CD on my mind, Sega Genesis on my mind, and I picked up Shining Force in box without manual at that local Gamers Paradise down the street.
Cool.
He was...
How much does that run you?
15.
That's not too bad.
No, it's not bad at all.
Not for Shining Force.
And with the box.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Shining Force, the card itself, I've seen at retail go for 25 to 30, and that's a bad deal. I would say the cart itself for 15 is...
Pushing it?
It's probably what I would expect to see it at retail for.
Okay.
And with the box, even though it's one of those early Sega Genesis games that came in the clamshell box that are incredibly resilient, and this one was a little sun damaged, it was still very good. Still very good to put on my shelf.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a Shining Force box. Why not, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, if you don't know Shining Force, you don't know Jack. Oh, sorry. Those are two different games, two different platforms.
Two different genres of games.
See what happens when we don't have a plan for the podcast.
I know. Things just blow up. Not that we have much of a plan to begin with.
Yeah. So having Sega on the mind, I am buying Grandia with my free 10 from PlayStation from that bonus thing.
Because you spent way too much money on the PSN this last month.
Well, yes. But there was stuff I wanted, so.
Well, yeah.
So I played Dreamcast, played some Crazy Taxi, Sonic Adventure. I spent a lot of time up in my office because I needed to be up there for another reason.
Yeah.
But let's see, what else did I play this week? Oh, Flintstones by Taito for the Sega Genesis.
Really?
Yeah, it's very good. It's incredibly short, but very good.
Okay. That's a 2D side scroller, right?
Yeah. Well, you remember Taito had all those Hanna-Barbera licenses, so we talk about was it Flintstones, Dino, and Hoppy.
Something like that.
Was the first Nintendo game. Flintstones Dinosaur Peak, Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, is the super rare, supposedly only released at Blockbuster. Although there's the past couple months, there's been this whole thing in the retro gaming community about whether or not these Blockbuster exclusive titles were actually Blockbuster exclusive titles.
Yeah.
And apparently no one can find like what we're looking for is like a flyer that says only at Blockbuster or something like that.
Nobody can find that
no one
flyer.
can find that.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is coming out of, it's been normally pretty accepted in the last 15 years of game collecting that Flintstones, Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, and Little Samson were two titles released by Taito, published by Taito, only in Blockbusters.
Okay.
The hubbub has been people are going back to older Nintendo Powers and not seeing any evidence of that. So they're like, the only evidence you have is that there's a Blockbuster sticker on most of them. And it's like, yeah, well, that's true. So now we need to go back and find, not from a collector's standpoint, because these are still very rare cards. No one's saying they're not.
Yeah.
We need to find, is this part of this history really true? So anyway, so Taito did that. Taito did the Jetsons game, which I had as a kid, which I still look for. It's pretty rare. It's super fun. And I was in Vintage Stock months and months and months ago, and I saw Flintstones on the Genesis, and I was like, I didn't know they made a Flintstones for a Genesis. It's by Taito, so it's going to be good.
Yeah.
And except for the fact that it's short, it's very good.
Okay. So it's money well spent.
Yeah, especially since it was probably like $5.
Yeah, that doesn't do.
Most of my cartridges I get at Vintage Stock. I'll usually, I won't pay more than $10 for most Genesis cartridges, just like randos that I find. I probably won't pay more than $5 for most Nintendo cartridges, just randoms that I find that are probably commons or uncommons.
Yeah.
Super Nintendos usually go. My common to uncommon ratio usually moves up to 15 then.
Yeah.
Okay. Just because basically I'm collecting. The guy that owns
the place down the street,
Gamers Paradise, as him and I were talking for a bit yesterday, and he asked me, you know, do you collect to collect or do you collect to play? And I collect to play. So.
Yeah, you don't just have them to make them pretty on your shelf.
Yeah, I'm not looking for a complete Nintendo or a complete Genesis. So.
Yeah, you just want to like, okay, there's all these awesome games that I either missed out on or I want to play again. And
or like, we rented it back in the '90s, and I remember it.
I remember it being good, and then you play it and it's not.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things like, as an adult, it's very fluid how much you want to spend on stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, Nichols Chaotix is very good, but I never, because I rented it, I was when you and I were in middle school, and I liked it a lot, but because it was on 32X, even though they made a lot of copies of it, it's technically an uncommon cartridge.
Because the 32X was not that popular.
Yeah, 32X didn't have a large print run. So it's technically an uncommon cartridge, but it is one of like the better games for 32X, so people usually want to charge in the $30 to $40 range, and it's not worth that. So unless you're a collector looking to create a full set of 32X titles.
Yeah, which that would be significantly easier than some other.
The only 32X title that I would say is probably worth close to the $60 retail price point it launched at was Web of Fire by Spider-Man.
Oh, okay.
Because it was the last
32X title. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's when they finally figured out, hey, this is what we can do with this. And
no. I would say if you're looking for titles that really push the 32X, the Star Wars game does a good job of it, even though it's stuttery, and it was a launch title. The Cosmic Carnage, the fighting game, has very impressive sprite scaling. It kind of does what Neo Geo fighter games did. You know, as you get closer, it zooms in.
Yeah.
Get farther apart, it zooms out. And you couldn't do that on the Genesis, and you couldn't do it really well on the Super Nintendo at all.
Yeah.
And probably Knuckles Chaotix.
Okay.
There are a couple other interesting titles. Metalhead. I like Metalhead. It's a mech battle game.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds.
And the Doom. You can find Doom on everything. Oh, and Virtual Fighter 1.
The original. Yeah, the Virtual Fighters look pretty
32X
good.
is the best plain version of Virtual Fighter, even though a lot of the sprites don't have the texture detail because the 32X couldn't do that.
They weren't sprites. They were models.
Oh, polygons. Yeah. So the polygons didn't have texture detail.
Well, but it's a 32X game. I mean, it's not like.
But it does play really well, and it's snappy.
Well, so. as snappy as Virtual Fighter could be, right?
Yes. Like, it's still, the jumps are still floaty. It still does. You're not getting Soul Calibur. You're not getting Tekken.
No, you're not. But it was one of the first 3D fighters, and
laid a
lot of the back.
I remember back when I had my 32X, and you would come over. We played it quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because it was visually, it was wow.
It was pretty awesome for 2000 or 1996 or whatever.
Back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Actually, it was probably 95. 95 would have been 95.
That sounds about right.
And it was kind of one of those. Whoa.
Yeah.
Can't believe it's doing this. Hey, you want to play this Sega CD game I got starring Marky Mark?
No. Who?
Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, CNC Music Factory and Marky Mark both had Sega CD games.
It was a really terrible Sega. The Marky Mark one was...
It's basically, here's the Marky Mark video, throw other stock footage on top of it.
It was goofy.
Game, in air quotes.
Yeah, it was goofy. It was not very good.
Let's see, what else did I play?
I've been playing a lot this week, I take it.
Yeah, well, because I didn't go anywhere on my weekend.
No, I say all I've been playing. Like my boss actually got me to.
Man, that was a halcyon day, man. You had with the Sega and everything, and then you had what I would consider Nintendo's golden era. Mm-hmm. You know, we talk about the golden era in comic books.
Yeah.
That would be Nintendo's golden era. I would say from 1990. So the Nintendo had been out for a few years. From 1990 to 97, because 97 is the tail end of the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
So we're talking the mid-range to tail end of the Nintendo. You know, you had the great license games were coming out at that time. You had, well, DuckTales was already out, but you had Chip and Dale. You had
Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers.
Oh, so good. You had Darkwing Duck. You had the Mega Mans that were good. So Mega Man 2 had already been out at that point, but you had Mega Man 3 and Mega Man 4. Mega Man 4, probably my favorite.
All the Mega Mans are good.
Some
of them are just not as good as others.
The music in Mega Man 3, I have a soft spot for.
Oh, the music in almost all the Mega Mans is really good, though. So
yeah. But you was this era where you had the great license games. So that was like you were talking about the Taito, Hanna-Barbera stuff. You had the Capcom stuff. Konami. Oh, Konami's licensed games.
Yes.
Bucky O'Hare. Bucky O'Hare is a game I still look forward to this day.
Yeah.
And it's another one of those that like the cart by itself will go for $20 on eBay-ish.
If you could find it, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Captain Bucky O'Hare. Anyway.
Yeah.
So you had all these really great games, and that cool developer knowing how to use the hardware. When it moved into the Super Nintendo era, you were looking at like Castlevania 4, which is probably the best non-Symphony of the Night Castlevania.
Super Castlevania or Castlevania?
Super Castlevania, but it's Super Castlevania 4.
Yeah.
So, Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse, on Nintendo. So, and you had Legend of the Mystical Ninja, and then as you start getting into the licensed games, more developers get better at doing the games. I'm always one of those people that I don't feel that Nintendo's titles were necessarily the standout on their platforms.
Well, I mean, a lot of people played a lot of the Nintendo titles because that's why they had it.
Yeah.
And a lot of, and just like now, you can get you could have gotten some of the same games on different on the Sega as well. But you could only have the Nintendo titles on there.
That Super Mario World setup, that platformer setup with the big open world, I think it was done better in some of Konami's licensed titles. Namely, even though it doesn't look as good as Super Mario World, it still looks amazing. Buster's Hidden Treasure on the Genesis.
Yeah, that was good. That was a Tiny Toons game, right?
Yeah.
Tiny Toons. Yeah, Tiny Toons.
So, because basically, like, in that world, all the different areas were themed. So there was like a hell area, there was a cold cave area, stuff like that. And there was more of them. There was more distinct levels in those areas.
There was a lot more of that.
Whereas, like, in Mario, every level was themed in the broadest sense to all fit together, but they were all different, very different.
Well, I mean, similarly to what you were talking about with the Buster game, in Super Mario, they did have the first world, all those levels had first two worlds, all those levels had their own little theme, and then you went to the cave levels, they were that. But if you're on a bridge where the dot was, then you had like a bridge level, and then you had water levels, things like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they changed the themes based on where the location was on the map. Like all the Bowser levels were gray and black and red.
But what I'm saying is like the Lost Forest levels, they were all in a forest, but they were all different. More different than the Buster's Hidden Treasure levels, which I feel kind of fit together better.
Okay.
But that's just a personal preference, and a lot of people would probably call me crazy for having it.
Super Mario World.
I'm not saying Super Mario World is bad.
No.
I'm just saying that blueprint of game, Konami went and improved upon it.
They did it one up.
Yeah, they did it.
Gave it a slightly better way of doing it.
They tweaked it. They tweaked the formula. It made it a little bit better.
Yeah. Okay.
So then you get into kind of like the later, we talk about Final Fight 2 and 3 are definitely better than 1.
Final Fight 2 is definitely better.
Saturday Night Slam Masters is to this day probably the only wrestling game that I even care about and think is good.
Yeah.
Especially considering like when the Nintendo 64 launched, after the initial titles came out for it, enthusiasm fell off in both the dev community and in the...
Well, and the N64 was we'll say it was limited in the amount of space you could put on it, because those things only held so much. And with the PlayStation 1, the discs could hold like 600 megs worth of stuff. There's a hell of a lot more stuff you could fit in there. And that's kind of the same problem that we have with the PS3 and the 360 right now is you can fit a ton of stuff on a Blu-ray, and you can't fit anywhere near as much as that on a single DVD.
Well, yeah. And
then that could be one reason why the N64 didn't get as many third-party developed titles as the PlayStation did.
Yes. Well, and the PlayStation did a good job of getting such a large lead early on. I think that helped the dev community move over there away from... I'm not saying the N64 is bad. You still have like the rare titles that are decent. Not
rare
developed titles that are decent.
Yes.
Even though I'm not a Rare fan and never have been, I don't think they do really great work like everyone else does.
Well, they're working on avatars now, right? Like that's their primary thing at Microsoft.
It's kind of like, remember last week we were talking about LucasArts, and I said the LucasArts that died is
not
the
LucasArts we remember. Yeah,
we remember the Rare that is still alive
is not the Rare that gave us GoldenEye and all that.
No. Well, and I would think like even the Donkey Kong Country games, we're talking about the later half, Rare games that probably stand up to the test of time better than any other.
Those looked really good for the Super NES. Yeah.
Yoshi's Island, Mario 2 Yoshi's Island is one of my favorite Mario games.
Yeah.
And it looks amazing for a 16-bit side-scrolling platformer. So we kind of get in there, and like I think that it really is Nintendo's golden age, and I think Nintendo doesn't even realize it because they did so little to make that its golden age.
Yeah.
Like the competition with Sega, they had the foothold with the Nintendo Entertainment System, and the competition with Sega really helped propel developers on both platforms.
Yeah, it did.
But whereas like Sega hunkered down and developed really great core titles, Nintendo just wasn't interested in that. I would take Sonic 3 over Mario World, as if you objectively say which is the better game. Sonic 3. Well, definitely Sonic 3 and Knuckles, the game that was supposed to be locked together. But yes, if you don't agree, you don't have to agree with me. But I would say
I'm saying you're basically comparing a launch title to an end of life cycle or an almost end of life cycle Genesis title.
Well, yeah. I would say I would take. It's probably a closer run between.
Would you say Yoshi's Island versus Sonic 3 out of those two?
In terms of like the better game and more
fun?
Out
of which one you would rather play? If you had to take one of those two games on a desert island,
Sonic 3.
Okay.
Mainly because I think Yoshi's Island is impressive in what they did, but from a gameplay standpoint, the Crying Mario isn't the best.
And Crying Mario would get on your nerves.
Although I don't agree with people that say it's a horrible game, because it's not.
It's a good game. I remember singing a decent amount of time into that.
Yeah. So like, Nintendo. A good example is Nintendo's in-house RPG. In Japan was Fire Emblem, which was very good, but we never got it over here. Japan.
We didn't get it until we got 3DSs.
Yeah, we got Super Mario. GBAs. Super Mario RPG was developed by Squaresoft.
Yeah, it was.
Contrast Super Mario RPG to Phantasy Star 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like when you talk about the greatest RPGs on the Super Nintendo, you're talking about things that are developed by Squaresoft, things that are even developed by Capcom, things that are developed by whoever developed Lufia. Not like Super Mario RPG is in that discussion.
Yeah.
But it's not like the best.
No.
And
I enjoyed it. I liked
it.
But
I'm not saying it's a horrible game. I'm just saying it's not the cream of the crop.
It's not the best RPG on the Super NES.
Yeah. Whereas if you talk about the best 16-bit RPGs, Phantasy Star 4 definitely has a spot.
We'll definitely both agree that is up there on the list.
Yeah. So it's kind of one of those things like Sega tried weird stuff with like Decap Attack and what is that one game? Ristar. They tried odd things. Now, granted, I'm not saying Sega's the better corporation or.
Obviously, Sega is no longer in the console business. Yeah. They just make games. So Nintendo did something right at some point.
Yeah. So I'm saying that competition against Nintendo made Nintendo better, made devs better, and the third-party devs really shined in a way that they haven't on Nintendo platforms since.
No, not really. And with this next gen, like, I'm afraid that Nintendo's not going to make it.
But we're also talking about developers that don't develop those type of games anymore.
No.
Konami would probably not do a Tiny Toon Adventures unless it was a remake.
Yeah, a DuckTales style remake.
Yeah. So I mean, they're not in that area anymore.
No. And a lot of that is also, they now have a formula. Like a lot of companies have this, from what we understand, because we're not developers, we don't work for these people, but they have this formula. It's like, okay, we need you to make X number of millions of sales, and this little RPG artsy game isn't going to do that. We need a Call of Duty-esque or something along those lines that's going to generate us millions and millions of dollars of sales. When you have as many sales as Tomb Raider had, and it still not be considered a success, there's something up with the way that game development is being done.
But But back in the Super Nintendo days, I mean, like Earthbound.
Not being dumb, being done.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
What is being dumb?
Well, but it costs a ton to make games now.
Yeah.
To make a game that looks like Tomb Raider, it costs millions of dollars, and they want to see a return on their investment, and not just, okay, we broke even, or we came up like 5%. They want to see a 10 to 15 to 25% profit on these games, and they have to sell a shitload to get that.
Yeah, we're just not in that area anymore where we're going to get, because one, a lot of it is that feedback loop that we've been talking about between the developers, the press, and the fans. Yeah. Is they kind of know what we want, and they're kind of, to hedge their bets, they're going to give it to us. In the 8-bit and 16-bit days, they didn't know what we wanted, really.
No, but they made games that they wanted to play.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that we wanted to play them too. And
I mean, Mega Man, I always love it that Mega Man 2 is kind of a happy accident. That Capcom said, well, Mega Man 1 didn't sell, but you guys can work on this in your off time.
And that's what happened.
Mega Man 2 happened, and Capcom to this day is probably very thankful that it did.
Yeah, even though they really don't have a whole lot going on with Mega Man anymore.
Think about what that Mega Man engine did for them. All those wonderful Disney games we were talking about, all those licensed games.
It was all the same kind of stuff, yeah.
Oh, I just remember Jackie Chan's Kung Fu. Oh, I loved that game. I did find that. So it's just weird. So I think with... We're not ever going to be in that space again, and I feel bad.
I don't think that's ever going to happen again.
For people that aren't in that space. The only place that we got back to that space was when we had a clear, defined, this is both the critical and commercial success of this generation.
Yeah.
Because like you look at old PlayStation 1 games, there's some crazy stuff.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of goofy stuff.
The PlayStation 2 games, there's some crazy stuff because developers knew like there is this giant audience out there, and if we spend $1 million and send it out, maybe they'll pick up on it.
Yeah.
It's sad. It's sad for Nintendo because I want Nintendo to be the Nintendo that I liked when I was a kid.
Yeah, but just like with LucasArts, if Nintendo goes away, it's going to be the Nintendo of today, not the Nintendo of the late 80s, early 90s.
When I was thinking about it today, I was looking at some of the Nintendo Power files we have, and it was kind of one of those. Yeah, after Nintendo Power 100, which was the start of the N64 era.
Yeah.
There's not really any need to read that magazine.
Well, no.
I mean, it's kind of one of those things like the Nintendo that is there today is not the Nintendo that I loved.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be, and they don't need to be. I'm sure the kids that grew up on Mario 64 think I'm full of BS when I say that there was a Sonic game that was better than a Mario game.
Now, yes. A lot of the Sonic games coming out now are not that great.
Yeah, I like Sonic 4.
A lot of them, like not the core run always to the right Sonic games. We're talking like
go right.
Yes, we're talking the Sonic Shadow Unleashed.
Yeah,
and all that,
so
those kinds of Sonic games.
And I'm sure the kids that grew up with Final Fantasy X in the PlayStation 2 era, when you and I talk about Final Fantasy VI being the definitive Final Fantasy, they think we're full of it.
Well, maybe they've never played it. You can get it on the PSN store. You can play it there.
So it's very weird, and I don't think we're going to get in that spot again where I think the Dreamcast killed a lot of stuff. I think Sega taking...
The Dreamcast killed dreams.
No, I think Sega taking a risk on that Dreamcast like they did and putting so much stuff in it, and the American side of Sega not being behind it at all, and then it dying so ceremoniously, and they axed it. I think that was the first signal to me that this is a business. This isn't fun anymore.
Yeah, it's not what we think it is behind.
Like it used to be, we're making games. This is fun. We're making money on it. You talk to but you listen to Mark Cerny talk about the early days of arcades, and like making Marble Madness and stuff. And he talks about like this wonderful. Let's try anything. Let's throw spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks. Maybe we'll make money. Maybe we won't. Who cares?
Now it's
the
not
Dreamcast was the end of that, and now it is. Let's make money. Maybe we'll have fun as a tangential side thing.
Yeah. So,
and the indie games are bringing that back.
There's still, I was gonna say, indie developers are kind of have that mentality where if I put time into this and I get money back out of it, awesome. If not, well, then I made a game that I wanted to make.
Unless you're Phil Fish, who seems to hate the world every time I see his Twitter account.
But and that's kind of a cool thing, right? Like you get all these indie developers who are making the games they want to make, and they may not be as pretty as say a Call of Duty
or smaller developer houses like
smaller
Axis, Monkey Paw, even Way Forward.
Yeah. things like that are making the games they want, that they're having fun making.
Yeah.
That kind of brings that feeling back to gaming is not just a business.
Yeah.
There is the business side, but maybe you can have fun while doing it.
And they're people our age too, so they're hearkening back to the games that we liked
and the games that they played when they were younger that they liked. So that's cool.
Don't forget to spay and neuter your Pokemon. Hopefully we'll have a topic next week. I'm sorry, this has been kind of wandering between the two of us.
Yeah, we'll.
But
can't do much.
Sorry, it's the spring and there's not much coming out.
We've got E3 in less than 2 months. So
yeah.
we'll have a lot there, but that's 2 months away.
Supposedly, this April reveal for the Xbox has now moved into May.
Yeah, it's now.
But still, no one's getting invitations. I don't usually believe those things until I see.
Somebody posted somewhere that it might be on May 21st.
Yeah, but do they have an invitation?
They wouldn't have an invitation yet. They wouldn't get it until like 3 weeks before. So.
Well, Sony gave us our invitation a month before.
Yeah, it's never mind. Tax day is tomorrow, so tomorrow's the 15th. If they get it a month before, they'll get it sometime this week.
That's true.
So
maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. Maybe we'll have something to talk about, maybe we won't. I'm probably going to play a lot of JRPGs.
And I'm going to work on
my time off.
I'm going to try to finish Guacamelee and maybe put in some serious time into Disgaea this week, because I have not been doing that.
I've been power leveling into Disgaea on my lunch breaks.
See,
the problem is like I power leveled weapons. I would go into their item worlds.
Oh, you went into the item worlds and got to the plateaus. And
and then I got out and had a good weapon for a while, and then I boosted up my sell ranking, my merchant ranking, and then I got it okayed for more expensive stuff, and now I just randomly bought items that are better than the items I power leveled, and now I feel like I wasted my time, even though I didn't.
Well, because your character's got all that
Because I'm totally like blowing through I'm way ahead of where I should be in the story.
Based on how much time you spent.
Yeah, it's the story level. I'm just like, oh, it's a story thing. Blow through it.
No, I went in and I power leveled the crap out of all my characters, and then out of the 3 characters that are in melee, because for some reason I can't ever seem to get the killing blow with my healer or my caster.
You're doing it wrong.
I must be. Well,
we'll talk about that at lunch.
Yeah.
Hasta la pasta. Don't forget to spay and neuter your Pokemon. Keep on gaming.